Chainsaw History.
Welcome to the bonus episode, everybody, of Chainsaw History. I'm Jamie Chambers. That's my sister Bambi talking, and this is another episode sponsored by our awesome people who hopefully are giving us money on Patreon, which you can get to at chainsawhistory.com. This is a series of bonus episodes where my sister and I dig into children's biography books that our parents foisted on us when we were little kids. So this is a series called The Value Tales. And Value Tales books are these 64-page hardcovers that take some notable figure from history. A lot of it's American history, but some are not. And try to find some specific virtue in one of these historical heroes that a child can take out of it. For example, previously we recorded Nellie Bly. She was the value of what again?
She was the value of fairness, and for
the
what
value
the
of fairness. That's right.
Fuck ever reason, it's like they wrote her even as an adult, sounding like a child. It's not fair.
It's not fair. That's the value of fairness, is whining about how unfair everything is your entire life. That's what children need to know.
No, she actually. I mean, she saw injustice and was like, "Fuck a bunch of that nonsense."
Yes, so you for your
broke
episode...
the shit out of that glass ceiling. I love the shit out of Nellie Bly. And you know what? Fun fact, just because it didn't go into her episode, I kind of didn't make good notes at all. Or notes at all. But yeah, she was a war correspondent in World War I.
Nice.
Was another of, I was like, I know there was another cool thing that she did that I couldn't think of. But yeah, she was the only woman that was allowed in considered danger zones.
Well, that's cool. So you did somebody who was admirable.
I did. She was great.
And I've got someone for you that is long admired and probably shouldn't be. And in fact, for years now, there's been a thing. So
then I know who this is going to be. Can I guess?
I was going to say, well, there's only one choice because we were supposed to record this yesterday, which would have been a national holiday. So it only made sense.
Oh, it's a different asshole.
So I picked The Value of Curiosity, the story of Christopher Columbus. Because we just Happy Indigenous Peoples Day a little bit late. I thought there's only one possible way to go. I mean, it was right there on the
this one's going
day.
to be dreadful and painful.
So here we have on the cover our boy, what was he, Cristoforo Colombo in the original Italian, because he is Italian. So the cover depicts Christopher Columbus, who here is this paunchy, big-nosed dude dressed once again in purple. Lots of purple.
The illustrator is so into purple, man.
Blue hat.
Primary colors and fucking purple.
And I can tell you one historical inaccuracy, right just on the basic art design for this character. Christopher Columbus, by all accounts, had blonde or maybe reddish blonde hair that went gray very early when he was 30 years old. So he always had light colored hair. Yet here he is, just jet black hair. But whatever.
It doesn't really matter.
So yes, this is a children's book.
Of all the things, of all the bullshit things that are going to happen in this book, I think that's going to be the least of them.
Now here's the thing, when you did your episode, you actually did research, you prepped, you looked at stuff. But because I'm a hack and a fraud, I just picked the book. I've not even really cracked it open. But I do say it's whereas you picked something, where I did my job correctly was in picking the book. I picked somebody we can tear apart. We're not going to... I can only make fun of Nellie Bly so much because she's someone I actually admire. Christopher Columbus has had his dick sucked
Quite enough
by history.
Oh no, and I guarantee this is going to be the propaganda whitewashed 80s America version.
Oh yeah, and this is written by
Columbus.
This one's written by Dr. Spencer Johnson, the founder of the Our Values Tales series, is the author of this one.
Oh, goody gumdrops.
And it says this tale is about Christopher Columbus, whose curiosity led to the discovery of the New World. The story that follows is based on the events of his life. More historical facts can be found on page 63. That's where the one-page biography goes. So here we go. We're already going with the opening paragraph here. immediately with the fallacy that he discovered the new world, despite the fact that there were plenty of people living in it already, and the fact that there had already, been a section of the new world colonized by Europeans 500 years earlier, but, what the fuck ever. He discovered the new world, right?
Yeah, and that's 2 separate continents. Bunch of countries. There's a
There's
lot
a lot of
involved
shit.
there. Yeah. Colonization's fun.
The Vikings got here first. Get over it.
The Vikings got here first. They just weren't giant fucking, they were always going to be dicks, but...
So here, just like you pointed out when we did your book, the story begins with Once Upon a Time, which is at least acknowledging that everything from this point forward is a bullshit fairy tale and not anything based on reality. And unlike your book, which began with a fully, I guess she was still technically a teenager, but she was grown.
She was a grown fucking woman.
She was a grown-ass woman. Well, we're beginning with a little boy. Once upon a time, long ago, so long ago that most people still thought the world was flat. Truth buzzer goes off. That's actually incorrect. But whatever. There lived a little boy named Christopher Columbus. Yes, the Greeks had figured that shit out, 1,000 years plus before. And even regular sailors looking at the horizon and the way this was they figured this shit out a long time ago. Nobody really thought the Earth was
they
flat.
just thought the world was a little smaller than it was
in the fucking Renaissance. Well, no, that's another thing too. The Greeks actually got the size of the Earth almost completely correct because they were really good at measuring shit in math. Like that Pythagoras guy, he knew some stuff.
Yeah,
so it was actually
but
a
lot of
the
that
debate.
Knowledge was lost because freaking for so many reasons.
So again, there lived a little boy whose real name was Christopher Columbus. Little Christopher liked to stand out the window at his father's weaving shop and look out at the port city of Genoa, Italy. What do you suppose Christopher saw when he looked out? And what do you suppose he thought about? Questions. So what do you think he saw when he looked out of his father's weaving shop? See, a river of sewage flowing by, the misery of human suffering.
Oh, I was gonna go with he saw new worlds to plunder.
Well, they're not even getting that
women to rape
ambitious.
And kill.
He just saw boats.
He saw boats.
He saw boats. Now, it's once again, what a magical, amazing things do you think he saw when he looked out the window? Boats.
Boats. He saw some boats. He was like, cool, I really like fucking boats.
Why? He saw ships in the harbor. And he thought about how they sailed off to faraway places. Of course, the ships didn't sail as far then as they do now. In those days, the sailors did not like to lose sight of land. Yeah, it was a good way to die back then.
Yeah. No shit.
One day, Christopher and his little brothers went down to the wharf to get a closer look at the ships. You know, said one of Christopher's brothers, you sail too far from shore, you'll end up in the sea of darkness where no stars ever shine. And monsters hide out there in the dark, said the other little brother. There's an ocean of seaweed that catches ships and holds them there so they never get away. I wonder if all that's really true, said Christopher.
He's wondering if his brothers know shit about shit. Ends up they don't.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
So then the little boys decide to go hang out with some sailors.
Oh, so they learned some new language.
Sure, nothing bad happened to these small, adorable, cherub-faced little boys with these horny, rough Italian sailors. Excuse me, called Christopher to the men. Can you tell us if the stories about the Sea of Darkness are true? And if there really is an ocean of seaweed that catches ships and holds them forever? Are there monsters out there? If ships sail too far out, can they fall off the edge of the world? One of the sailors chuckled. We can have some fun with these youngsters, he whispered to a friend. And then you need to see
this got dark.
Look. See the look on this guy's face. Look at that smile.
Oh my god, he looks like he is going to eat them.
Yes, he has...
Get in my mouth, children.
He has disarticulated his jaws like a python, and this giant, wide-eyed mouth is opening up. The sailor made a scary face. It's all true, he said. There are islands in the sea of darkness that appear and disappear like magic. You can hear bells ringing under the sea and see ghostly horses race over the waves. The terrible seaweed stretches for miles, waiting to snare unwary ships. It's frightening out there, little mates. Very frightening indeed. Christopher agreed. This was very frightening. Just the same, he decided that when he grew up, he'd go out to sea to find out himself what was true and what wasn't. All right, so jumping ahead, our young hero here decides that he wants to be a ship's captain one day, so he signs up to be a cabin boy. And he goes out to sea as a little kid where I'm sure he wasn't abused, molested, or horribly mistreated in any way.
Sure, it was great. He loved it so much that he wanted
and it shows
to.
Him, it just shows him delivering a tray of dinner to the captain, who looks like a jolly, curly-haired dude. But now we're going to meet
he's serving him dinner all right.
Oh, yeah. And now we're going to meet our cartoon sidekick. So, as you can see in this lovely illustration here, a seagull flies down
he has a
to the
seagull
side of the
friend.
boat. Well, of course.
Well, that might actually be legit. If you feed them enough, seagulls will follow you around.
Although the seagulls were there all the time. I mean, that's certainly true enough. So here he is, little boy. He was standing at the rail one day, looking out at the water, when a seagull swooped down and landed almost at his elbow. "Hi, Chris," said the bird. "My name's Seagull." And it's literally spelled S-E-E. Seagull. "I've been watching you, and you look like as if you're thinking some very important thoughts. I'm curious, just what are you thinking about?" Christopher blinked. "I didn't know that seagulls talked." And I've decided to give him this, for some reason, Charles Dickens British orphan accent instead of this little Italian. He should sound like Mario from Super Mario Brothers instead. But whatever.
See, in my head, he's the bird from The Little Mermaid.
I think it would be a little too distracting if I was like, "I didn't know that a seagull's talked as a spicy meatball." So I'm not going to do that. So instead, he's a little Dickensian waif. Christopher blinked. "I didn't know that seagulls talked," said he. But then he laughed out loud. Of course seagulls didn't talk. This particular seagull was just a make-believe friend. It was Christopher himself having fun, pretending that he could chat with a bird. So, in this version, at least, he's a little boy and having an imaginary friend, especially to escape from the trauma of the cabin
abuse.
boy. He's having a little dissociative episode to not think about the things that happen in the captain's cabin,
Again, he's a little cabin boy on a ship, far off at sea.
Look at this
no
adorable little face.
He might just be like, the only friend is the birds.
Look at his face.
His little round child face.
This little seagull is his only escape from this nightmare.
Give him his...
So, this is where the bird teaches him his virtue that he's going to teach the rest of us.
Oh, God. His virtues are already been taken.
Oh, yeah. This little boy doesn't have any virtue left. "Well, Mr. Gull," said Christopher, "I was really..." "You could call me Sea," interrupt the bird. "That's what they named me because I like to fly around and see things. You understand how it is. I'm curious." "Curious," said Christopher. "I don't know what that word means, but..." "It means I have a lots of curiosity," said the bird, completely unhelpfully, because when you try to define a word by using the word "fuck you..." It's like, thanks for telling me what that means, you dickhead. "I wonder about things, and I try to find out about them." "Well," said Christopher, "I guess I have lots of curiosity myself. I was just wondering what's on the other side of the ocean." "That's great," said C. "When will you try to find out?" "Just as soon as I can," answered Christopher. And boom, instant, we have now jumped in time, and now he looks like the big-nosed dude from the cover.
Cool. Shit happens. We can't talk about that shit because it's very upsetting.
Yes. There were dark years where Christopher had to get his revenge on those who violated his childhood virtue. So it says here that he became He kept on sailing in ships and studying maps and charts and became a quite the map maker himself. And his imaginary seagull friend is still with him to help him repress his childhood trauma. Because now he's the one with the cabin boys, not the other way around.
The cycle continues.
I'm finding out more about the world all the time, said Christopher, and that makes me feel very good. Me too, laughed Seagull. This writing is just the best. So this part shows Christopher is reading about the travels of Marco Polo and his journey to an eastern land called the Indies, where there was gold and silk and spices. So, soon after this, Christopher was walking on the beach. To his surprise, he found an unusual piece of carved wood and some strange plant pieces. They had been washed up by the waves. Christopher picked up the wood. How odd, he said. I've never seen anything like this before. It's wood. Neither have I, said Seagull. And I flight a lot the plather than thee many things. Christopher put the wood in his pocket and he picked up the pieces of plant. Come on, See, he said. We'll try to find out about these things. So they go and find some white-beard old dude in this picture here.
Okay, and he's grown at this point. He's a grown-ass man.
Oh, yeah, he's a grown-ass man.
Going, I wonder where this is. I've never seen
He's a successful
before.
map maker. Well, apparently it's a carved piece of wood. It looks like some kind of little totemic object of some kind.
Okay, all right, that makes a little more sense. It's like, found wood. I've never seen wood before.
It said carved wood, but it didn't really say. It's literally, he found a carving washed up on the shore. So he's trying to take it out, take it to a scholar, and nobody knows where it came from. But after a while, Christopher thought he knew where they came from. Do you know?
It's going to be something really fucking boring.
This is the best part. They came from the other side of the ocean, he exclaimed. The book about Marco Polo's travels is a true story. He really did see the land called the Indies, and it was filled with strange things and odd plants and trees. Suppose the wisest navigators are right. Suppose the world really is round, like an apple. So again, with the
oh
complete
my god!
myth.
They didn't bother to research this shit at all, did they?
Well, to be fair, this is exactly how I learned it in grade school too. Like, it wasn't until I don't think I was until high school that I actually had it dispelled to me, the idea that that Christopher Columbus.
Okay, so why do we teach?
In fact, it might have even
wrong?
because I think I was 17 when we had the big 500-year, the 500-year anniversary of 1492, and they did a lot of Christopher Columbus movies and documentaries and shit. And that's the first time I heard the thing, because there is a person to blame for this particular piece of bullshit. By the way, this is where I can show off, and we can blame him for a lot of stuff because and this ties back to our very, very first episode ever about George Washington, because there's an American author who just wrote a bunch of bullshit that became has been ingrained in American school children ever since. That was Washington Irving.
Oh, that asshole! Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one that came up with the whole George Washington cherry tree thing.
Yeah, it's like
he's the one who came up.
He's the reason that children believe bullshit. It's like, why do we want to teach that?
He's the one that thinks that Christopher Columbus, thought that was trying to disprove that the world was flat, even though that was, globes existed as a thing. Like, there are objects, there are globes older than Christopher Columbus that were in use, even if they weren't exactly accurate. So this is just a weird old idea. Anyway, but almost everybody says it's flat, Seagull declared. So anyway, he goes on arguing with his imaginary friend, saying, no, this is right. And this stuff that I found is totally from the Indies. And so he is going to come up with this plan to prove his theory of the world being round. Terrific idea, cried Seagull. But then the bird looked a bit worried. But what about the Thea of Darkness, he said. Doesn't it scare you? And I realize Seagull is apparently Bullwinkle's first cousin. I realize I'm just basically doing a Bullwinkle accent. Whatever. It's fine.
It's fine.
Of course it does, admitted Christopher. But I'm curious. And if I want to find the truth, I have to take some chances. And get a lot of other people killed with me.
Oh, God. It all just kind of hurts. It's causing, actual physical pain.
Well, if you must, said Seagull. But if you're going to sail to the other side of the ocean, you're going to need money for ships and supplies. So then there's illustrations of Chris running around to various European monarchs trying to hit them up for money. And then and we see one queen with her big thumbs down while she's laughing in his face, which is kind of my favorite one. It's like, nice. Fuck you,
dude.
Especially if he really was going around like, I can prove the world isn't flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know
thanks.
that, dumbass.
Now, I know from my own deal that the very first place he tried was Portugal because he was married to a Portuguese wife, and that was where he was kind of set up for a while. But eventually, of course, famously, he found sponsors in with, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain.
Spain and Castile.
So he was Italian. He was an Italian citizen of Portugal who finally got a royal commission from the Spanish government.
King Ferdinand was a giant loser piece of shit, and his wife was a badass. Unfortunately, she took all that badassery so she could dislike Muslims a lot and fight them.
But did she have green hair like in this illustration? Because that's amazing. She has got green ass hair.
Queen Isabella of Castile and Spain should not have had green hair.
Now here is the most exciting paragraph in children's books ever. Christopher Columbus waited while Isabella and Ferdinand thought it over. He waited and waited and waited. He waited for 6 years. End of paragraph.
He waited for 6 years.
And then he just literally is like, in this, he's just talking to himself and his imaginary bird. Just like whining about how they're not curious enough. How can she be curious about green hair dye and not the other side of the world?
Maybe it's because she already knows the Earth's round.
So, page 24. Christopher had almost given up hope when word came at last. Queen Isabella was now very, very curious. Ding, ding, ding. About the far side of the ocean. I guess we could do the drinking game version where every time we say the word. She was giving Columbus 3 ships. And of course, every American schoolchild knows the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And the supplies he would need for his first voyage.
Well, that's true. He did get those ships. He did get supplies he needed. That's that's solid.
Accurate. At first, Columbus was delighted, but this is one of our great questions. But then he found out that getting the ships was the easiest part. What do you think was going to be harder?
At least this one's not as condescending as the last one.
Yeah.
Maybe it was because
he has hit a penis, and he's worthy of immediate respect.
And she was just like whiny.
It's unfair. Instead, he's just like,
unfair.
What's wrong with you people? Aren't you curious?
You're not brave and curious like me.
Even though I don't even know if it was written with sex, it really seems like they're just trying to shoehorn the keyword into the book as many times as possible. So we gotta have the word curious. So anyway, it's showing
fairness. So she had to go. It's not fair.
So here we have a weird Burger King's kids club of sailors that he's talking to, trying to convince them all to risk almost certain death sailing off the edge of the map of the flat Earth.
Well, they have to go do it for their Burger King.
And of course, here is the illustration of what these people truly believed, that there was a flat Earth with fucking giant purple dragons and shit.
Man, they're gonna be so disappointed.
This is a psychedelic nightmare. These dragons, like, proportionally sized, are like cosmic Cthulhu like monstrosities. Like, this thing these could eat the earth like a pizza, the way it's illustrated in this book.
Nice.
I may have to take a picture of this to be like the cover image. So now he's trying to talk this group of sailors into going with him. We'll never reach the Indies, warned one man. There are monsters beyond the sea of darkness, said another. There's huge monsters who can swallow whole ships, moaned a third sailor. What? Even if the monsters don't get us, we're doomed if we go too far, said a fourth man. Game over. Remember, I added that last part myself. Remember that the world is flat. If we sail off the edge, we'll be lost forever. Then Columbus asked
sailors were a bunch of dumbasses.
Then Columbus asked a very good question. How could anyone know about monsters or the edge of the world if no one had ever sailed there before? Ha ha! I win, losers! Get in the boat.
No one's ever come back.
I've out-argued you. You work for me now. Say, that's right, shouted a seaman. If we want to know what's true, we have to go find out for ourselves. I've gotten to wondering. I'm too curious to stay home. Ding, 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 ding. I'll make the voyage. I need a hotel bell to ring every time. I have one. I'll get one later. For next time. Good for you, said Columbus. There's something else you might like to know. Queen Isabella is offering a rich reward to all who sail with me.
Was that a bunch of bullshit? Yes.
And so the men agreed to go, and Columbus had his crew. And here we go, the year. On August 3rd, 1492, the three ships sailed out of the Spanish harbor of Palos. Columbus was full of hope. He even carried with him letters from King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to the emperors of the Indies.
All right, that tracks. That's actually true.
Yeah. The ships sailed west.
The ship sailed west. And they carried letters.
On and on they went until the land disappeared behind them and the sea stretched around them in all directions. A silence had come over the men. They now knew that no ship had ever before come so far. Then suddenly a man cried out in fright. An ocean of seaweed! He shouted. We're sailing right into it! Of course, here's the illustration. Game over, man! Seaweed! Okay. It will catch us! Cried a second man. We'll never get away! It seemed true. There was seaweed on the surface of the ocean for as far as the eye could see. The sailors were sure that the seaweed had roots growing all the way down to the bottom of the sea. They thought that the ships would get tangled in the weed. They feared they would never escape. Don't worry, said Christopher. Look at that seaweed. It's not thick. It's just floating on top of the water, you stupid, illiterate bastards. We can sail right through it. I might be embellishing slightly. And sure enough, the ships did sail through. As they went, Columbus noticed something interesting. He scooped up a handful of the weed and showed it to the sailors. What do you think they saw?
Seaweed.
Well, in this case, he's holding a big handful of seaweed, and there's a little, stereotypical red crab standing on top of the weed.
Okay. So the weed has crabs?
See the little crab on the seaweed, said Columbus. How can land be far away when such creatures are crawling around here? Have faith. We must be nearing the Indies. That was completely unscientific and bullshit.
Yeah, and...
Yes.
Sea
life doesn't exist.
Sea life doesn't exist.
Not outside of sight of land.
I love they didn't research anything at all.
However, the men felt better just because Columbus made up some bullshit. They even began to be curious, says the book. But when Columbus put the crab back on the seaweed and went off by himself, his face was serious and sober. So even the book knows he's full of shit and just trying to keep himself from getting... There's a little thing called mutiny that sometimes would happen on a ship. He was really hoping that didn't happen to him because it usually didn't end well for the captain.
Yeah.
So... I hope that little crab is a land creature, Christopher said to sea. We've been at sea so long. Sometimes I begin to wonder if we'll ever see land again. So, you gotta love it. He's completely bullshitting them. He's like, no, don't worry. When you do something you've never done before, it's bound to be scary, said C. But it's a good thing we have brave, curious people like you, Christopher. We'd never find out anything. So, it's awesome that these guys are all probably gonna die. Because let us not forget, he's like the book is trying to say he's just trying to prove the world is round and is part of his way to get to the Indies. But either way, he's wrong. He's 100% wrong about getting to the Indies, about what size the Earth is, whatever. And so these sailors working on him have every reason to believe he's going to get them killed. Yeah,
it's a true story, and he almost did.
we reach the point now where there's giant, horrible storms, and his imaginary seagull's wing gets injured.
How does your
Which
when you're
which is the
such a
worst
shitty,
He's such a great captain.
even your imaginary friends are getting injured in this expedition.
So there's
So how bad
craziness
do
is
the
going
actual
on.
sailors have it? Question mark, question mark.
Well, the ships are tossed around. Then everything goes calm. The raging sea became as calm as a pond. The sailors were quiet. They were frightened. Do you know why no wind at all would frighten the sailors just as much as a heavy gale?
I do. The doldrums. Yeah.
Well,
Because they
also-
were on sailing vessels.
And wind is kind of important in
Wind's
order to go
important when
anywhere.
you're sailing.
That's right, says the next page. Without any wind in the sails, the ship was becalmed. It wouldn't move at all. Don't get all fucking technical on us. Whoa.
Yep.
The sailors began to mutter to themselves. We'll never get home, said one man. We'll stay here in the middle of the ocean until we all die. So they all start freaking out. And the men are watching the dolphins play in the water while they're all waiting around to die.
That happens. That is a hazard when all you have is a sailing vessel.
How long will we be becalmed in these unknown seas? Christopher wondered aloud. There's no way to tell, said C. That's what makes it so scary.
Yep, and that's
Thanks.
why the Vikings got there first, because they rowed. They had boats with paddles.
Finally, after many days, a gentle wind began to blow. They were traveling on again, and little waves were slapping against the hull of the ship. The men on deck could laugh again and wonder what they would find when they reached the Indies. Even C's imaginary wing felt better. I added the imaginary part
finally.
because I love how it says he's imaginary, but also treats it like it's real, which is
Dumb.
internal logic, whatever.
It's bad writing, Jamie. It's
The
bad writing.
the imaginary bird will soon be able to fly again. Thank God. Never mind that guy who got tossed over the side in the middle of the storm, or the other one who died of scurvy.
I was about to say, lots and lots of people died on this expedition.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of them made it back.
They've skipped that part. So far, the only casualty is the imaginary seagull's wing.
Okie dokie.
And so they sailed at a good speed for many days. Then at last they heard the sound they'd been waiting for. A cannon boomed from one of the ships. Land! Shouted a sailor. I see land! But when Christopher and the other men looked out across the water, they saw no land. The sailor had been mistaken. There was no safe harbor. It's like Ashton Kutcher stands on the prow of the ship. You've been punked, y'all.
Just kidding.
There was just miles and miles of more water. They sailed on. There was nothing else they could do. But now the crew didn't feel frightened. They didn't feel curious either. How do you suppose they felt?
Mad as fuck.
Oh, you are correct. Bingo. They are angry. We want to go home, they shouted to Columbus. You don't turn the ships around, we will. That's mutiny, thought C. And now we can listen to the imaginary seagull's thoughts.
That's such bad writing.
We have zero perspective, point of view, or sense of what our third-person narrator is doing here. But whatever. So we're now reading the thoughts of the imaginary seagull. You'll go to prison if you do that, shouted Columbus to sailors who totally gave a fuck. We don't care, cried the men. And this is the moment of truth for Christopher Columbus in history, because he very, very easily could have been tossed over the side of the boat. Desperate, Columbus tried to awaken the sailors' curiosity. Ding, 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 ding.
No, they didn't have enough supplies to turn around.
Yeah.
They would die.
Don't you want to find out what's on the other side of the ocean, he asked. Don't you want to go home and tell your children and grandchildren that you were the first ones to sail to the Indies?
What?
And then the next sailor makes a really good point.
They already could sail to the Indies.
If we don't turn back, we may never see our children and grandchildren again, said the men, making a completely logical point.
They'd already been to the Indies. It was not a magical place.
This was just a different
They'd already
way to
been
go.
there. He was trying to find a shorter route. That's all.
Because he thought he knew how to do measure the size of the Earth better than Greek mathematicians, and he was wrong.
And he was fucking wrong. He was wrong about a lot of things.
So Columbus is still trying to keep himself alive. "Let's sail for 3 more days," said Columbus. "If we don't sight land by then, we'll turn back." The men grumbled and muttered, but they agreed to sail on. And now here's a great part. "We must be getting near the place where the world ends," said one man. He listened for the thunder of the waterfall that would surely take place when the ocean poured over the edge of the world. He began to tremble. "I don't hear anything yet," he said hopefully. Yeah, I love it. We suddenly just switched to some random sailor.
I hate all of this story. It's really disjointed.
"But I don't see any land either. All I see is water. If there is land ahead, I wonder what it'll be like. Will it be the Indies? Will it be golden palaces?" "I don't think there is any land," said a third man. "We'll have to turn back." Suddenly, the men heard a noise high above them. It was a soft, hurrying, flapping noise. What do you suppose it was?
Birds.
Yay! Birds.
Birds.
"Birds!" shouted a happy sailor. "It's a flock of birds!" "At last!" cried C. "That means there's land nearby." The sailors cheered, for of course, the imaginary seagull that they couldn't see or hear was correct. Birds couldn't fly endlessly over an ocean. They needed a place to land and rest their wings. At last, they were close to land. So the ships changed course, and they followed the birds. And now they were so close to safety, the men began to wonder, what kind of place was it that they were coming to? So we're still in the boats. We're really dragging this last little bit out. Because I guess they don't want to talk too much about what happened.
Well,
I don't think they want to spend
land?
too much. Yeah. What do they do when they get? What do you think
What did
Columbus
they do
does?
on land?
Well, they soon knew that it was a place where they saw trees and bushes and lots of green growing things. For they saw twigs and leaves and fresh little red berries growing in the floating in the water, not growing. "It won't be long now," they said eagerly. Night fell, but not one of them thought of sleeping. They all watched. Then suddenly one of the men saw something, a dark mass rising from the water, very black and huge. Was it a monster? The cannon boomed, and the crew came running, eager to see. "Land!" they shouted. "Land ahead!" And this time it was for real. So there's a silhouette of an island. There it was at last. A small island lay just before them, rising up out of the water. The flags were raised on all 3 ships. The cannon boomed again, so loudly that the sleepy moon seemed to stir a bit.
So they're in the middle of the night. They were like, "Land! Let everyone
Shoot
know
the
that we're
moon!"
here!"
So they fire their cannons at the moon, who apparently was frightened. Because it says it seemed to stir a bit. "We will conquer the moon!"
We will conquer the moon!
Perhaps it looked down and asked what these men were doing there and why they were making so much noise. Sure, okay.
Okie dokie.
I'm glad we used that. That was the best paragraph for our historical fiction. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said Columbus to C. "I was beginning to be afraid we'd never get here. I wonder what it's like." Columbus wasn't the only one who was curious. Ding, ding, ding. The entire crew had crowded against the railings to look at the island. They could hardly wait until morning. So now here we go. Our fateful
Hooray.
rowboat full of
Oh,
Europeans.
the sun is happy for them. The moon was pissed
Yes.
off, but the sun's digging.
The moon's like,
they're like,
nothing-
"Hooray!"
Nothing bad's ever going to happen because of this.
The moon was disturbed, as it should
There's-
be. The
sun's
moon
like,
is wiser than the sun, apparently.
There's no way this is going to end in slavery and genocide. At dawn, Columbus and some of his men climbed into a small boat. C perched on the prow, and they rowed toward the shore. Columbus reached inside his coat to make sure his important letters were safe. Because, everybody knows that whoever the fuck they're going to meet can totally read Spanish.
They're just going to read it and like it.
Yep. They were the letters of greeting that Queen Isabella had given him. He was to present them to the Emperor of India and the Emperor of China. Christopher Columbus was in for a surprise. It's the end of the page. He was in a surprise. Yes, and he was could not have been more wrong.
He was so surprised. Although he did not even get anything right away. Because he was a dumbass.
No. Well, according to this, he was shocked that not a single emperor was waiting for him on the beach. Like you'd expect emperors to do.
Yeah, wait for strangers.
But he did notice that the plants and stuff matched the shit that was floating around in the ocean. And then the bushes moved. Someone was hiding there. Dun, dun, dun.
They were probably waiting in ambush because these fuckers woke them up.
Well, look at this picture of happiness and goodness. Well, here's the truth. The truth is the natives apparently were quite friendly and generous to the people who just showed up. So let's just go with their version before we... Because this is the part where I know we're going to start getting upset. So let's just read it for a little bit.
And this is where the book takes a turn.
Quote, "Why, these must be Indians," said Columbus, when some people with red-brown skin came out to greet him. Columbus had made a very natural mistake. He thought he had landed in the Indies. So even though these people didn't look a bit like the yellow-skinned people that Marco Polo had described, he called them Indians.
Yep.
I love how it literally, the paragraph, within this one paragraph, it revealed why he was dumb for thinking and saying this, yet also saying it was a very natural mistake.
It's a very natural mistake. But again, in this
book's
version, they've never been to India, so...
Well, that's the thing, though. They said they can't make up their mind about that part.
No, they can't.
They've changed their mind, just like it changed their mind in this paragraph, whether it makes any sense for him to think this or not. Whatever. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, you know where Columbus actually had landed. Don't you, Bambi? Don't you? Where is he? Where is he?
South America?
No. Well, this, of course, they just say he's in America. He was on the island of San Salvador, off the coast of America. Now, okay. Well, I'm just going to read this.
Off the coast of America.
Off the coast of America.
There's only one America. It's fine.
The America.
The America.
Well, there's nothing more American than saying there's only one America, Bambi.
But that's not where he was.
The islanders were very friendly. They didn't seem to mind being called Indians.
Well, they probably didn't because they had no idea what the fuck these people were saying.
They didn't mind being called Indians, and no one's ever had a problem with it since.
Everything's fine.
And they showed their island off to Columbus. They showed him some neighboring islands, too. They couldn't show him any emperors or great cities or gold. They didn't have any. "I'm a little disappointed," said Columbus to sea.
That's okay, because you know what? He's going to go back to Spain, and Spain they will rape and pillage and kill the land until they finally find gold.
So, okay, let's just blaze through this part real quick. Sea was quite well by now. Thank God his imaginary wing healed after the storm. And no longer had a bandage on him. So he says, "When you're curious and you go looking for answers, you may not find the ones you expect," he said. "That's part of the excitement." "I hope Queen Isabella will be excited," said Columbus. "And I hope she'll like what we found." So after looking around for several months, Columbus and his crew set sail for home. They had lots of interesting things to show to the Queen, trees and plants. Even some of the Indians went back with Columbus. They were curious too, and wanted to see what was on the other side of the ocean.
They were curious, and so they just volunteered and came with them. It was great.
Yep.
It was all fine.
The voyage back to Spain was stormy, but at last they arrived home with their strange cargoes. "We did it," the sailors said proudly. "We didn't turn back. We were with Columbus, and we found a new land." The sailors hurried home to tell their families that they hadn't fallen off the edge of the world. Hooray!
Yeah, one of those ships sank. They didn't all come back.
Well, that's not what it says here.
Oh, well, yeah.
However, to be fair, it only shows one ship unloading, so... They were excited to tell everyone that they hadn't fallen off the edge of the world or been eaten by giant Lovecraftian space monsters.
Sweet.
"I have been to the other side of the ocean," Christopher told Queen Isabella. "I have found strange new land, and I have brought back many interesting things and people for you.
Here, have some willing participants.
Then Columbus showed the Queen's advisors a map he had made. It was like no other map made before. It showed the ocean and the islands he had seen on the far side. Now, loving the illustration here. Look at this incredibly perfect map of North America. I know this is a true map, said Columbus. I made it only after I had been to these islands myself. I am sure, though, that there are other places where no one has ever been. Who will draw the maps to these other places? Who has enough curiosity, ding, 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 to go to find out about them? I am not a sailor, said the Queen, but I am full of curiosity, and I will help you. And once again, I'm going with a very
You're going with a very
person.
British, with
I'm
a
going
very
with a-
British Queen, instead of
Queen Victoria. I'll see to it that you can sail to the New World and have found just as often as you wish. Even then, Columbus did not know what a truly great discovery he had made. Until his voyage, no one in Europe had ever even suspected that there were two huge continents, North and South America, on the other side of the ocean.
They never suspected, but he drew a map to it perfectly.
Perfectly. Well, that's how good he was. Later, with the help of the wise Queen, Christopher sailed back to America 3 more times. He continued to be curious. He continued to try to learn new things. Even when he didn't find anything, he knew it was fun just to look. Because Christopher was curious, he opened the way for later explorations. And because he was curious, we will never forget Christopher Columbus. Now, you may wonder about the value of curiosity in your own life. Is there something you would like to learn more about? Like, for example, how Columbus had a gold collection quota for the young men of the island he visited, and if they didn't make their quota, he would chop off their hands and make them wear it around their neck as an ornament of their failure. I'm super curious about that. Yeah. Or how he was offered a native girl on one of his first nights there and brutally raped her. So it literally ends, whatever you decide to do, let's hope it is something that will make you happier. Just like our curious friend, Christopher Columbus.
If, genocide makes you happy, I just say go for it. Thanks, book.
Oh, wow.
It's gross. I'm not a fan.
So they made the world dumber, him smarter, sort of, even though he still admitted he didn't find what he was looking for, and completely ignored, the depopulation, genocide, harsh enslavement, warfare, disease.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be curious about something, at least could you have been, curious about history? Because that would have been neat to include at least a couple of facts in there.
Now,
it's like they got the date he left right.
Yeah, that was an actual fact.
Did they get his birthday right? Because they didn't get Nellie Bly's birthday right.
Let's see. Let's just look real quick. According to the Wikipedia on good old Christopher Columbus, it says he was born between August 25th and the 31st of 1451.
So they don't know.
And that's exactly what it says in the first paragraph of the historical facts page here. So got that right. I mean, it looks like they got the basic nuts and bolts here quickly, even though I see a very obvious formatting mistake that their typesetter should have been fired for. But yeah, interestingly enough, but here the historical facts ends right after they find land, and then just mentions he made 3 more visits back, and that's it. It's like, we don't want to talk about all this other stuff and be realistic, because
we don't want to talk about that.
Kids don't really. It's like that's gonna make the Columbus Day celebrations really awkward, and that's why I have been on board, even long before my personal political self change. I've been on board that Christopher Columbus was an asshole trained since college. I mean, there's just no defending some of the shit he did.
There was no defending any of the shit he did.
And he kind of set a standard of how these indigenous people would be treated by the Europeans from this point going forward. The Columbian Exchange led to a lot of really awful shit.
We have sophisticated weaponry that they don't.
Yeah. And I think here we are in the year of our Lord 2021, where our president, Joe Biden, just made some sort of proclamation about yesterday being Indigenous Peoples Day officially. I didn't see how that all shook out, but apparently at least Indigenous Peoples Day is being given equal standing to Columbus now, I guess.
That's good. Maybe.
I don't know. I was happy enough that during our little uprising we had last year, a shitload of Chris Columbus statues got ripped down.
Nice.
And I'm cool with that because the only Christopher Columbus we liked is the director of the first Harry Potter movie and Home Alone.
Yeah, that Chris Columbus is pretty good.
Yes, that's the Christopher Columbus I like. I do not like the Christopher Columbus of this book or his stupid little fucking seagull.
His injured seagull. He injured his imaginary friend.
That's
how much of a dick Christopher Columbus is.
I was amazed that we spent actual real estate in a very limited number of words on this book about a big historical figure about the injury and recovery of an imaginary seagull and learning its innermost thoughts. So this is a prequel to Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, starring a mentally sort of the Forrest Gump of the seagull world, hanging out with Christopher Columbus.
Oh my God. He's not even smart enough to hang out with Scuttle from The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, I didn't go with a Scuttle-like voice. Yeah, so I think the two books that we've done so far, you did Nellie Bly, I did Christopher Columbus, and I think we've kind of shown both the high and low bars set by this series. Like Nellie Bly, for that book's all its fault. It was well intentioned. It was trying to, talk up a woman who didn't get a lot of recognition. And then, of course,
and
now on the other...
deserves it.
Yeah. And then on the other side, we got Christopher Columbus, someone who's been over-celebrated, and it completely whitewashes and scrubs clean all the shit he did and just pretends like he was this great visionary, even though he was a dumbass who didn't even find what he was looking for and was completely wrong. Like, he didn't discover San Salvador because he was smart and knew it was going to be there. He literally lucked into that. If they'd been sailing a different way, they all could have died, possibly. All those men would have been completely within their rights to string him to the mast and to turn their asses back around.
Correct.
But
here we are.
So, fuck Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, fuck Christopher Columbus. That book sucks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it 1 star.
Despite my dramatic reading, it did not improve the fact this book blows. So sorry, Dr. Johnson. This is not a winner.
It's not a good book.
This was, yeah.
It's a 1-star book, yo.
And it's literally saying, so it's like, okay, if we're gonna take the lessons to heart here, the value of curiosity is to just be so curious you're willing to risk the lives of others. And on a completely wrong hunch, and then just steal all the credit and glory when you're fuck up and you just happen to, come up smelling like roses, even though you were 100% wrong.
Pretty much. Yep.
So yeah.
Be curious, fuck over your friends.
Risk the lives of others, fuck other people over, and then steal all the glory you can, while setting the stage for horrific colonization.
Don't forget the raping and the killing.
Yeah, and not only that, but even leaving behind provisional government that'll keep it going, so that even if you're not there to directly oversee the rape and the mutilation and the enslavement,
it's still happening in your name.
Yeah, you've put good people in charge. All right, well, I feel like I need a shower after talking about Christopher Columbus as if he is someone to be overly praised.
Yeah, I liked my book better than yours.
Yeah. No, I deliberately picked one that was going to suck.
Upsetting.
It was on theme. So, thank you for everybody listening, supporting us on Patreon. We will have a more regular episode of Patreon. A regular episode of Chainsaw History will be coming your way soon, along with more bonus content, more children's books, and more shenanigans.
Okay. Bye.
See ya.